Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in the xeric garden because we are surrounded by all sorts of pokey, prickly plants. We've got yuccas, agaves, dasylirion, opuntias, you name it, we got it. We got a program for you today. We're doing bloodthirsty plants. It is spooky season. It's the middle of October, so we're looking at plants with spinies and pokies and all just the nasty, gnarly bits that might give you a fright this time of year. But we've got our Director of Horticulture, Greg, who is diligently taking notes, surely not doing his homework right before it's due. Cerebral. Absolutely. And we've got Tim Alderton, our research technician as well, who will be showing off some of these fun pokey plants and talking about their uses, their virtues, and a little bit about their morphology. So it should be a wonderful program. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I can pass things over to Greg and Tim to show off our bloodthirsty plants.
Ooh,
Thank you.
Yes, this is, we've spent a lot of energy on this one. Tim mostly. I was running around the garden and Tim was pressed to the computer, coming up with a lot of stuff for us to talk about.
Fairly general though, but
fairly general, but important stuff. You know, learning about the physiology of plants and what the parts and pieces are for helps you understand them much better. So that kind of was our goal with this. And of course, the overriding theme to kind of hitchhike on the season. And my favorite holiday, Halloween, which is fast approaching. So kind of bloodthirsty plants. And we narrowed it down to things that have thorns, spines, and prickles. There are lots of other things that are bloodthirsty. I had to hold Tim back. He wanted to bring some carnivorous plants, and what doesn't speak to bloodthirsty with the word carnivorous in it. And I think that's a whole nother talk. This bloodthirsty bunch was thorns, spines, and prickles, but carnivorous stuff will be in the future, and that'll be a good one too, because that's a group of plants that's special to both of us. But what we want to do is to start off with, what are those definitions? Because there's a little bit of mystique in that. Most people think of everything that's sharp on a plant as a thorn, but that's not always the case. Roses in particular, we're going to debunk that myth today. So we'll talk about those definitions, and then we've got lots of examples of those things to kind of drive that home. And we'll end with what we like to do quite a bit is give you some further reading and other resources that are out there that'll help if we missed any of these definitions and our enthusiasm to talk about these guys today. So the first one is simple, is a thorn.
Yeah.
And what exactly is a thorn? You know, thorns are defined as modified shoots of the plant itself. So that means one of the things I kept coming across is it's a branch that's gone to the dark side of the force.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's a mechanism that has evolved to help protect the plant from herbivores and insects and other things that are gonna feed on it. And it's actually kind of a smart thing. You know, you only have to bite something once to realize that's not something that you want to bite anymore. Or in the case of us, when we're handling these things, you're only going to pick it up a certain way one time before you realize there's a special way to handle this, both in the garden and in the nursery.
I think thorns are easier though than some of the others.
I think they are too. So things that are true thorns are hawthorns, crataegus.
Not the Indian hawthorn. I've never seen a thorn.
Not the Indian hawthorn. Thank you for throwing the Latin in there. Crataegus, cockspur. Another common name for that. It's in the Rosaceae family, which they have lots of those sorts of.
So apples, if you might have in your own yard, will often have a thorn-tipped spurs growth on them.
And pears will throw thorns also.
You know those calorie pears that pop up everywhere.
I think there's one right there.
No, that's not. That's euonymus.
Okay. I was looking at those big leaves and thinking that was
it's almost as bad.
Almost as bad. So that's the definition of thorns.
Yeah, and I have a simplified version.
Go.
So mine's just a stiff, woody, modified stem with a sharp point.
Yep.
You know, so think of it that way, and so it's more of a branch with a sharp point.
It's a branch that has terminated to kind of have that sharp point, the part that's going to protect from the herbivores. The other definition for sake of today is spines. And spines are modified leaves or parts of leaves. And the way to remember spines is to leaf us alone. You don't want to touch it. That's a good way to kind of remember that and the difference of that. Spines, since spines are formed from plant tissue, they also contain vascular tissue. So that differentiates them from prickles and from thorns. It's an actual functioning part of the plant in addition to providing that protection. So what are some things that have spines on it?
Oh, spines. Oh, my apuntia here, and the one that I think we were showing in the previews, which is one Apuntia phaeocanthus.
Anything in the cacti family, hollies and those sorts of things. We'll talk about all of these
spine
guys
tips on those
in particular. Those are the true spines. And the third definition of the three that we're doing today is prickles. And one of the definitions I came across of that was they call them sharp skin tags.
That sounds good.
That's a good way to remember it. It's kind of disgusting if you want to think about it. But they're derived from plant skin tissue, and they don't contain xylem or phloem. They're just from the tissue. They tend to be short and sharp, and they break off quite easily. And sometimes they break off inside of your skin.
Yes, that's the problematic thing.
Yes. So things that have prickles on them, and I'm sorry to inform those of you that like the song "Every Rose Has Its Thorn."
That's wrong.
That's wrong. They're not thorns. They're prickles. And having worked with a lot of roses, that's something that elicits a lot of emotion in me because I've lost buckets of blood in my lifetime working with roses. And there were some roses in my experience that when you handle them and that little tip would break off, it would cause certain kinds of dermatitis in your skin.
Yeah, exactly. I always get a red spot, and this is a nasty one. I don't even remember. Is this Grand? I think this is Grand Champion, but I cut this morning, which is nasty. It's really prickly.
It's a good one. And since we're showing this one, if you want to zoom in on there's a Rugosa rose down here, which is a good example of what prickles look like. You've got all those different sized ones up and down the stem of the plant. Not that traditional one that's coming off of the leaf axis. And that really kind of illustrates how kind of small and defined that they are. And their sole function is protection.
And you can have prickles actually on the leaves and the stems both.
Yep.
Which is kind of strange because the leaves themselves can turn into spines.
Right.
But it's different.
Right.
So
other things that have prickles are brambles, things in the rubus family, and
there's some in the Solanaceae. I'll show you some pictures of those later.
We'll look at those too, and Aurelia, our native, and some of the other ones too. So that's the definitions that we wanted to kind of put out there, the guidelines for the things that we're gonna talk about today. All that information are in the books that we'll talk about at the very end. If you want to go really, really deep into that stuff, this plant systemics book that's here is the one that I had in college.
Me too.
That Tim had in college, and we'll list those things so you can find them. We'll talk about those in more detail. So let's roll through some of these things. We got a lot of them to cover. We want to leave time for questions, but we want to try to get to.
I think I started out on. I have a list of where I started. It's kind of give us a guide. I actually started in kind of reverse order.
That's fine.
But so I started with the prickly stuff.
Okay.
And so we have your rose, your picture of the Rosa sericea subspecies Omiensis phaeocantha, or pteracantha. I'm sorry, pteracantha, which is a really cool rose. I don't know that we've tried growing it here. I haven't.
It's one of my favorites. It's one that I always talk about for winter interest.
It's really cool.
I fell in love with it at a nursery. We're actually hoping to order some from a nursery we just kind of stumbled across. It had so much to a winter landscape. I think we can maybe get away with it.
Yeah.
And roses are kind of on borrowed time anyway because of rose rosette. So I'm hoping we can
speaking of rose rosette, whenever you get a rose rosette, it's super prickly.
Yes, that really messes with the genetics of the plant and causes that. But that's a very, very strong favorite of mine.
Oh, you can go ahead with that. I don't have a picture of that. That's fine. Go right ahead.
So talking about that with the holly, you can zoom in here on the leaves, all along the edge of the leaf there, the modified structure. and that can be really well defined, like it is here.
Actually, I think those might be spines. Not
spines. Did I stray off the path?
I'm not sure. I can't. No, wait. No, they are prickles. I have to. Yeah, it's prickles.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
They're prickles.
They're prickles.
This is our native Ilex opaca. One of my favorite hollies out there. It should be grown a lot more. It's a very versatile plant, but all the hollies have these. Sometimes they're well defined like this.
Yes, and then I have, that's Mary Nell, which is one of my favorites.
This is another favorite of ours.
It's not terribly mean, even though it has lots of spine tips on the leaves.
But that's gonna do its job and keep things from nibbling on it and protect it from that kind of defoliation. It's a really, really good adaptation.
Then I don't have examples of this in the garden right now, but it's one I've always loved, and everyone when we've had it loves it. Or Solanum keatonense, the Naranjia, which bed of nails. I think I have some pictures of bed of nails. I have a couple plants, and then I have a real close up of a prickle on that. As a second photo, which that's a fun one for kids. And you can see the prickles on that one quite clearly, and you know that it's something you might not want to touch, but it's really ornamental.
Very pretty colors.
And it has purple tones to it. Then there's another plant after that. It's a little less common, but it's a little bit meaner, is a Solanum atropurpureum, which I have a couple pictures of that. Both the leaves and the stems on that are covered in prickles. The stems are super prickly. The leaves are nasty in their own right, but they don't get it on their fruit. And then here in person, I have a cousin, which this one's actually slightly toxic. This, I think, would be considered a prickle. This is a datura fruit. And so fruits can even have prickles on them. If you've ever heard of gooseberries or seen a gooseberry, they often have prickles on them, and which that's actually a totally different group of family. That's in the Grossulariaceae, if I remember right. But anyways, you get prickles on things like that. Or I'm not sure, chestnuts.
Chestnuts definitely
would probably be a prickle.
Yep.
So that's something at this time of the year you might see.
And all designed to protect the genetics, protect the seeds, so that it can germinate and do its thing and spread its progeny.
So another one I have here, and I love this plant. It's semi out of flower right now, but it's been only flowering since May, so I guess it's okay that it's starting to settle down a bit. This is one of our erythrinas in the garden. This is just in bud, but this stem has prickles on it. This is Erythrina bidwellii, which is a cross between our native Erythrina and a South American Erythrina. Our native one is Erythrina herbacea, which is about a 3-foot tall herbaceous perennial that you'll see actually growing down around Wilmington in the wild and further south. And then cross it with the South American Christogalli, and you get a fairly large growing herbaceous shrub for us, more or less. But on the undersides of the leaves, you'll get prickles, and on the petioles, or the rachis, and also on the stems, you can get a few prickles.
It's a nasty one.
Yeah.
It bites back.
Yeah, it protects itself, but it is a gorgeous plant.
Flowers forever.
Yes, once it get going. So those are some of our prickly plants. Oh, I guess we have our Aurelia here, and this is variety Manchuriensis, I think, or Manchurica. But so one of the Aurelia species, and they can be downright nasty to deal with. And this one is clearly prickly.
It's very similar to our native one. You get them all up and down the stems. You get them all up down close to where the leaves are.
The leaf rachis, and also, I think there's some on the leaf blade itself.
Yep.
Coming out of the leaf surface, much like on the Solanum keatonense.
Yeah. It's actually kind of attractive.
It is.
It's nasty. It's the definition of.
I'm kind of afraid of it.
You don't want to run through those with delicate clothing on. It would not be recommended.
So our next group, which I have a few pictures of, are the spiny plants. And so some of the spiny plants, and spines, they can arise in different places too. It's just, as we said, like a firm, slender, sharp pointed structure representing a modified leaf or stipule. So the stipule is the little bracts that form at the base of the leaf, but they are right on the stems of the plant, so they act more like a thorn kind of, but it originates from a different material. And so things like that you know of, and I have a picture of one in there, is a berberis, and I have Berberis lempergiana, which just as a photo and the slideshow. So your barberries, that is, they have they have spines, not prickles and not thorns. So they're not thorny, they're just spiny. And then, I do have a favorite one. Where did I put that? Oh, here it is. I have it. I have a couple other ones here, and I have one I don't have. And so this is another one. This is next to kin to the berberis, and some want to lump it into berberis. We still separate them out. For us, this is Mahonia trifoliata, or Berberis trifoliata, I think is the other name. But the leaves on this have spines on them, on the edges, and it's quite nasty. This is from the, let's see, southern Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona. I've gotten to see it in the wild in New Mexico and Texas, but this is one I find it's very attractive. And so our Mahonias, and here's another Mahonia up here. This is one that's a hybrid I think Tony came up with during, I think 2020, as it's called, pandemic. We haven't got it planted in the garden yet, but it has a really fine spine tip or serrated leaves.
Very stiff.
It's stiff, yeah. It's not overly mean in comparison to some of its cousins that we also grow, all the Asian Mahonias that we grow. But this is a southwestern one, and they tend to be even meaner to me, but I find them really cool because they have blue-green foliage. Another plant I have here, and this is a cousin of a previous one, and I had to look at this one to figure out where the structure was coming from, and that's why I think this is a Iliococcus. So this is related to the Aralia, actually. It's in the Araliaceae, the same family, but it has stipulate spines. So they're coming from the stipule of the leaf. So versus the prickles that are on that Aralia. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, this is one that's actually commonly used as a landscape plant. This is a variegated form that we have in the garden.
Very aggressive, very fast growing.
Yes, it'll grab you.
Yep, in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And so let's see, who else do I have here? Oh, yeah, I have those too. So going back to pictures, let's see. I didn't cut this one, but we'll do this Opuntia. This is our little Opuntia here. This is Opuntia, which is back actually just off to the side over here. Didn't mean to do that, but there was suggested that Greg and I should have a battle with the Opuntias, but this is Opuntia phaeacantha Mesa Sky, and this is just a really cool one. This one, actually, they're fairly flexible in this one. I have other ones that are nastier, but there are safe Opuntias too, like this one. This is what I suggested we have our battle with, our pat. But that's another Opuntia that we have over here. It doesn't have any long spines on it, but this is just a fun one. Yeah. But some other plants that you might have in your landscape, which, going back to the slideshow, Osmanthus heterophilus, so what are they called? Holly-leafed false hollies, or tea olives or something. Tea olives. Yeah, I mean, Harryama is the selection that I actually have a picture of on the slideshow. But behind us, there's a bunch of different things, and the next plant that's on the slideshow actually goes along with that. And it's actually my favorite of the agaves. So agaves, and I didn't put any yuccas, they're also in that, they have a spine, tip leaves, and then the sawtooth edge of the leaves on the agaves are also have spines on them fairly often. There are some agaves that don't have side spines as well, but those are just always fun. And down here I have a leaf, but over to that side there is just a gorgeous Dazzlerion, and which also has these spined edge leaves, which are like saw-tooth edges. And if you stick your hand in there, it will grab you.
A lot of these are shaped to almost do that.
Yeah.
Is they'll hook into you So you almost remember.
It's to keep the herbivores out of them.
Yes.
You know, as they stick that deer or that roaming cattle in the Southwest, that buffalo maybe originally stuck its head into they at least noticed it a little bit. Maybe not the buffalo with that thick furry face, but that deer might think twice about eating that.
All these plants, and we'll talk about the other ones as we go on too. For me at least, there's so much winter interest in something like that, and just the textures of things. And these are all reasons why we have them here, is to show examples of those things, not just the growing conditions, which is a whole nother thing, but the colors of these. You know, this one that Tim was talking about, that glaucous blue color, that's so attractive, and just the shape of the leaf, that's going to catch your eye when deciduous things drop their leaves. So these are all reasons why we grow these, not because we're suckers for pain and for bleeding, but they add so much interest to the landscape at different times of the year, and that's why we kind of grow these and recommend them to people.
In the uncertain times of adequate water, that's how we started this garden here in reality, and so that is they are very drought tolerant, though. And as long as they're not wet, these will probably do just fine. They grow very quickly in our climate because they are from xeric climates, but
a little more erring on tough love with a lot of these.
Yeah, you don't need to set up an irrigation system for them.
No,
whatsoever. So let's see. Oh, I have a collection here, and I'm going to get over here real quick. And these give you a little bit safer look, and these take a little more water. But these are some fun things. Actually, these are all sea hollies or eryngiums that Mark collected actually in Uruguay this past March as seed. And this is one that I have actually just grown over here in an adjacent bed. This is Eryngium pandanifolium. So it's the pandanus-leafed sea holly for all intents and purposes. And then this is, I think, an unknown species he collected, but they all these have them. Not all Eryngiums have these type leaves, but there's a bunch that do. And this is Megapotamicum, and let's see, this is Eburnium, which I actually have a picture of the Eburnium we've had in our perennial border for way longer than 20 years, because it long predated me in the working here at the Arboretum. And it's been there for decades and decades. It does great for us, but it kind of gives you that look of the Dazzlerian. Yep. It's still prickly, but it's a little safer. I hate to say it, than to have the actual Dazzlerion in your garden. And it's a little bit more forgiving to when we do have excess water, like we did the last 3 months, but now we have not had a drop since
it's dry.
So it's getting dry again here. But and the fun thing about these is these are actually related to carrots. And that's always my thing. I always trick my interns in the summer with these. Now, what do you think this is related to?
The last thing.
And they always think it's a Dazzlerion or a yucca or an agave, and those are all monocots. These are actually dicots and carrot relatives. So I always have fun with these. But yeah, quite prickly. There's some other genera in the same family from New Zealand that we can't grow, aphilas, I think, or something like that. And they are downright. They will grab. I mean, they will
vicious.
They're very vicious. But they don't like summer moisture. They don't like moisture in our climate here. Heat at the same time. But
again, great for the garden. I love the look of all these. They're just, the new growth is a little bit lighter. This is a little more glaucous.
And this one looks like it's going to be compact. I don't know anything about this one yet, or this one. These two I have experience with. So I'm looking forward to planting some of these new selections in the garden here in the probably late winter, early spring. I don't know if I want to torture these through their first winter, not knowing what they'll do.
That's part of working here.
I'll let them get established before I do
Before
that.
we hurt them.
Yeah. And then I have one more spiny plant, and I have a picture of a Cynara syriaca, which is the ancestors of your artichoke. So it's a thistle, and I think maybe the picture I put on the slideshow might be able to illustrate, if you look closely, there are spines all along the base of the leaf, much like these eryngiums just had, and kind of like the Dazzlerions, but they're not related at all either. It's in that daisy family, the artichoke or the Cynara there. But it's a really cool ornamental for us as a cool season plant. They have these silver leaves in the late summer, fall, winter, spring. They do melt a little if we have a really cold spell in the winter, but it flushes back out and then goes summer dormant for us here most of the time, and then it starts the cycle again. But it's a little bit prickly. And some of the true artichokes are a little friendlier to use than our Cynara syriaca, but I do like them. So going on to the thorns, we have a few things scattered here. Why don't you start with what you have in front of you?
So, quince, good Lord. Yes, Shanameles. Yeah. So this is a traditional one in the Rosaceae family. Gets lots of foliar diseases. Looks mostly like twigs this time of the year. Lots and lots of thorns. We had a collection of this at a garden I worked at, and we referred to it as the shopping bag trash collection because shopping bags would get caught up in it, and it was almost impossible trying to get them out without losing quarts of blood. Tom Rainey has done a lot of work on developing ones that are more disease tolerant, that bloom longer, that are a little bit more well-behaved. And this is one of his. Which one is this?
That is Orange Storm.
Orange Storm. This is my favorite of the ones
it's really vigorous.
It's really vigorous. It flowers for a long period of time. It's got some random spurts right at this time of the year. It's actually got leaves on it late in the year when most of them drop their leaves from diseases and things like that. Doesn't have any thorns on it. So far, so good. It's been a really, really tough plant in a couple gardens that I've worked in. I had this in my garden in Charlotte because I like that bright orange color, great for bringing inside, but just a really, really good we were talking about plants for borders and hedging and things like that before we started the cameras. And this is definitely one that fits into that. There's my pyracantha.
Yeah. And this is Orange Sapphire is his trade name. And I have a slide too, so it might be easier to see. You might not.
So I don't know, I'll try to leave it still here and not herky-jerky it around, but you can see the thorns on this guy. Another plant in the rose family, prone to other diseases and things, but the fruit on these are so incredibly nice. And I wish I could remember, Larry Mellenchamp gave me one in Charlotte that was really, really disease resistant and held the fruit for a really long time. And that's a plant that I want to go back to Charlotte and get some propagules of. But there's red berries, there's these orange ones, there's different sizes. And this is a good kind of a hedging plant. When I worked at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, we would plant these on the human side of animal exhibits to keep people from reaching in and going towards the animals. We use pyracantha a lot. We use Aurelia in places. Another one we used was Poncirus, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But that's another reason to use this grouping of plants with these three characteristics. It's a deterrent to get close to a window, close to a house. If you want to kind of steer people through a garden and away from things, pyracantha is a good one for that, and a lot of things that we've talked about.
Here, let's see. I'll try to give you this one.
So this is one of the Hardy Mock oranges. Which one is this?
That's Flying Dragon. So that's
Flying Dragon.
Poncirus or citrus. They've lumped it back into citrus again.
Yep.
But
you are not going to get close to a rare animal exhibit or close to a window or a door if this is growing around. I kind of have a love-hate with this group of plants. They had a lot of interest in the wintertime. The fruit drops down and adds a little bit of interest on the plant and on the ground, but they're really hard to prune. There's always some weed tree that gets up through them, and you got to try to find a way to get in there to get that out. But I love the green stems. I love that winter interest in the color, and I like the contorted look of this one in particular.
Somewhere in our photo collection, JC has a picture. I don't know if it's straight Poncirus trifoliata or that is citrus trifoliata, or if it's Flying Dragon, but it's of a hedge.
Yeah.
And I think you could. It was cut, like a 3-foot hedge, and it was so dense I think you could stand on it. So it was that,
it's very
rigid,
very rigid stems. I could definitely see that if you. I can't imagine how they would hedge that. You might have used a tractor or something.
Who knows? This was in the pictures probably from the 60s or 70s when they were doing something strange.
We have to find that one after this talk. I'd love to see that picture, but very, very dense. I could definitely see it being used for that.
Okay, and then this one, let's see, this is Crataegus Columbiana, I think, which is one of the western species. Doesn't do all that well for us, but this is one of the hawthorns. And we don't have many in the garden, thank goodness.
It used to be a plant that was really good for urban landscapes. Very small tree, flowering tree, decent fall color, sets a lot of fruit. So you have the fruit interest. It's good for wildlife. With the change in our climate, it's become really susceptible to rusts and foliar diseases. I see a little bit of rust spot on this one. It's been a victim of kind of the changing climates. There's a lot of work being done on this tree from a conservation standpoint. There's a lot of native ones that
the Haw River we have so close from here is named after
There's
them.
a lot of our good friend Adam Black down in Charlotte at Bartlett is doing a lot of work with this tree in different parts of the country because there are some that are threatened, and other colleagues of ours are working on it. And you see here where it gets that common name cockspur. It looks like the spurs that roosters have on their legs for defense and that sort of thing. It's a nasty thing. It's going to grab you. There are some thornless ones out there that are used in the landscape, and you see this used a lot more in the Midwest and
Europe.
upper Mid-Atlantic. They're all over England and Europe, where it's doing a little bit better than it does here, but. They don't do really well for us here, and I killed a bazillion of them in Charlotte. I'm not ashamed to admit.
And then I actually have, for the slide I had with the definition on for the thorn, there is this is Gladitia japonica, but I have a picture of Gladitia sinensis, which was way nastier. This tree is actually not terribly far this direction, but you can see the nasty thorns on this. So this is one of the honey locusts, and they are downright nasty. Unless the ones we grow in our landscapes are typically inermis forms or thornless forms. And I don't know that there's a thornless form of japonica or sinensis, but they make a really good Halloween type tree. And when I first started working here, I think Nancy DeBrava had a Halloween tour, more or less, and it had the sinensis that used to be out in the east on that tour. And it's like, I think Denny had me remove that tree. He was afraid he's going to come in sometime and have a kid impaled onto it. And I think you said, it
was Gladitia aquatica, which is related
native
to
ones.
this, a native, and it's got enormous thorns. It was the biggest one I've ever seen in our garden in Charlotte. And I was doing a tour one time, and we found a bird that had been impaled on it, which was very gruesome. And somebody asked me one time, "Why do you take a picture of that?" And I was like, "That's not something you're thinking about when you find that on a tour with a group of people." I try to get out of there relatively quickly, but I used to have a piece of it, and I lost it in the move. It's somewhere in a box, but it's massive. And again, that's used to protect it from browsing, probably from buffalo.
It was from the megafauna, is what they believe.
Yes.
Like mastodons and mammoths and ground sloths.
Yep. The good old ground
So they
sloth.
would have the enormous thorns on the lower part of the tree. Up in the tree, it doesn't get them.
Right.
So it's lower down on the trunk. The bottom 10 to 12 feet to deter that predation by the megafauna. And there's some other plants like that. I guess the Osage oranges, the macluras.
Yes.
Same idea.
Yes.
They have big thorns on them when they're younger. So that's our prickles, spines, and thorns. But then I have a couple other things, and I don't even know where to put them. So
associated, related things.
With sharp things. This is pampas grass, and I have a really nice picture of this. So, and there's actually a close-up of the leaf as a second slide for that, Blake, if you can bring that up. But I was working around this about a month ago, and I was picking up a piece off the ground, and I inadvertently tramped on one end of it, and I pulled, and I ended up with like a slice in my hand.
It's the worst form of a paper cut imaginable.
They have micro serrations. It's a serrated leaf edge, and it will literally slice you like a razor.
It doesn't fit into our thorns, spines, and prickles, but it's a bloodthirsty plant.
It is, and it's one that you could, it's readily available to use as that protective plant for your landscape.
So this is a public service announcement to all of you out there that grow this in your landscapes, is be careful when you're running by the leaves.
I have to say, where I live I live in an apartment, and they have this like right next to a sidewalk. They have like a row of 3 of them, and it half eats a sidewalk.
Ours is.
It's not even as bad as that. It's worse than that, I should say.
At head level.
Yeah,
too.
but it's like, yeah. So, and then let me see. I have a couple.
Ruscus is worth talking about.
Yeah,
That's
the
a
Ruscus.
cool plant.
I have 2 here, and it's kind of prickly. I'd say it's probably a spine, but I'm not 100% sure. Ruscus is such a strange plant.
It's not. You don't. It's one of those kind of oddities, and being an arboretum, it's something that we have to grow by law, I think. But it's a really interesting plant, and correct me if I'm wrong. Was this used to clean butcher's blocks?
They called them butcher's brooms.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's really coarse. It's really, really dense. They would take a bundle of this and use it to clean whisk away their butcher's blocks.
This is a culeatus, if I remember correctly, and it's quite prickly. There's some smaller forms. We have one called Elizabeth Lawrence, and anyways, but they are really cool plants. They're in the asparagus family.
Who'd have thought it?
Exactly. But it doesn't have leaves.
Nice fruits.
They're what are called, I think, cladophylls. I always mess that one up, but I think it's cladophylls. But these do have a spine tip on them. So it is kind of quite bizarre in that sense. And so I have a plant here. This is the part of it that's not overly mean.
The seeds fall.
Yeah, that's because actually that's stones. Because this is Proboscidea Louisiana. So it has a couple different names. Unicorn plant is one. I should have brought a fresh seed, but I didn't. Seed pod, but I didn't. But the leaves on this are very viscous, and I was actually they're sticky, and it's picking up our permatil the pathway here. But anyways, the seeds on them, when they open up, are these claws, and they sometimes call it also devil's claw.
Devil's claw.
And so it gets caught in like fur on animals and
legs and feet.
And to help disperse the seed. So it's kind of, it's not quite bloodthirsty, but it's just a really cool plant.
I found out, I was doing a tour for my good friends at Auburn University, and they saw this planted in the border, and one of the gentlemen was beside himself that we were growing that as an ornamental plant. He's like, I've spent months of my life trying to eradicate.
Where does he live?
Somewhere in Alabama.
Okay, yeah. So
it can be kind of a bit of a weed, but the flowers on it are absolutely beautiful.
I planted it several years ago, and I don't plant it anymore. I only ever get a couple plants to come up, but
it's not bad for us.
They're not bad. I'm looking kind of to see what it says in this one book we have here, but this is related to sesame. The sesame seed, it comes in the same family.
I never knew that.
But yeah, and Proboscidea is an elephant. It's the same name, and if you saw the unripe seeds, they kind of look like an elephant's trunk. But anyways, that's just a kind of a cool one.
Is that all of our samples?
I didn't say anything about palm. Palms can be a little bit nasty, and actually, you have palm too. We both have. So there. This is actually, you have those upside down. These are the needles from a needle palm that we have in the garden. And that's the frond. That one doesn't have mean fronds.
No.
But it has a protected base by these long needles. And I did read some, I think, what are these? Are these spines?
That would make sense.
I think these are, I don't know that they're vascular, though. They could be.
They could be
on
the trunk. They might be.
I can't remember
until they go this color.
But I looked it up earlier. I forgot now already. But those are off the natal palm, which is native to the southeast. And then over here, this has a nasty thing on it. And this has a sawtooth petiole on. This is a Washingtonia robusta. So this is a Mexican fan palm, and it will grab you if I let it. But palms can have them coming from different things. Actually, some palms actually have roots that function as spines, some of the tropical ones. They'll have these aerial roots that come out of the trunk and they form into spine structures. So that go into that vascular system on that. So yeah,
makes sense.
But yeah, there's a lot of cool things once you get digging, and we found that out that some things are more complicated at times. But
it was definitely a nice rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah.
So we want to end with a couple of books. This is a personal favorite of mine from Larry Melanchamp. Larry was a good friend of mine in Charlotte. God bless his memory. This is called Bizarre Botanicals, and some of the things that we talked about today were in here. But this is a great book to give as a gift to get your friends interested in gardening.
For anybody, it's not just for it's not a garden person already.
No,
it's a good introduction. It has it's fun. As well as informational.
It's a good gateway to get more interest. Sorry, I got the jazz hands. Always got the jazz hands. But it's a great introduction to any level of gardener, and even if you aren't a gardener, it's just a kind of an interesting thing about plants. And a lot of the ones that we talked about are several of them are in here.
And then the second book here is one, this is how to print, but you can find used books. We were looking it up before we started. This is what I used, and you said you used this to the same edition?
Yeah.
The second edition, or yours the first?
Probably the first edition. Probably the first edition.
I took a few years after you.
Yes.
This is what I used at Penn State whenever I was taking a plant systematics class there. And it's still, I love this book, and it's worn a little bit. But it has all kinds of terms. It tells you about the plant families, which is something if no one has ever noticed who's listened to me, I love plant families. And this is part of the reason is because of the class that I had with this. So, but that has some good definitions and things. And then this book I was given, it's actually had some sun on it on the one side. But it has all kinds of terms in it. This thing, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, I have to really think about this. The systematics one, actually, it filters down the definitions very concisely to a few words. This is, I mean, it's very dense, and it will. You have to dig a little bit, but it is really interesting. I use that when I sometimes need to talk to students and stuff. It has a ton of information in it. Yeah, so just a few books there that are very informational and might give you some further details on spines, prickles, and thorns, among other things. So that's a big circuitous route. We rambled and jumped back and forth on things. I hope we didn't confuse everybody, but it's that time of the year.
No kidding. Yeah, we're all feeling it.
It's drink from the fire hose time of the year.
Absolutely. We did have just the smallest handful of questions to come in. Marilyn wants to know, sweet gum balls, are those prickles?
I don't think they are. I don't think they do. I think they definitely protect the seeds
and for sure. It helps with distribution, I would think too. Because that would get close. I mean, it could be. I'm not 100% certain on that.
No, we'll have to do some digging on that. But that's a really good question. I know it helps with dispersal. It's going to get hung up on things. I know they float and move around that way too.
Yeah.
And will get hung on other things. I think it's more for that than for protection.
Because by the time the seeds dehisced, there's no reason for the plant to protect that structure any longer. It's just sort of incidental to the
it's organic matter that under mature trees is going to help kind of recharge the soil too.
Yeah.
Just kind of like leaves do. But that brings up thinking about chestnuts that have those husks around them. What is that mechanism?
No,
that's definitely a prickle there.
I think that is a prickle too.
Sure.
But I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to look up liquid amber and see what they describe that as.
No kidding. Okay. Another Marilyn, different Marilyn, wants to know, what do you call the sharp points on sawtooth oak?
Sawtooth oak, those would be spine. All your oaks in general that are white oaks are going to often have those. It's just it's the end of the nerve or the vein in the leaf that extends. It's into a drip tip kind of mechanism on a lot of them.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think they would fall under the three definitions.
Yeah, no.
I think that's more of a a way to channel water and
Sure.
keep it close to the plant. But some of the red oaks, you're thinking of scarlet oak, they'll have those little things on the end also, but they're not sharp. They're very pliable.
Other things like that come from wet climates tend to have a drip tip, or moister climates. Like some of our Ericema consanguineums in the lath house, not all forms of them have, some of them can be a couple inches long.
No kidding.
But they aren't spiny at all. They're just more to direct water flow. But I don't know if that's what it is on that, but that's a possibility.
Sounds good to me. Okay, Carol wants to know, do all of these plants share the same water and sun requirements?
No.
They're all over the map. You know, Ilex opaca, moist, well-drained soil, sun, shade, roses, that's a whole nother can of worms.
This Mahonia is probably a shade. This is an Asian species that takes shade. Well, that Mahonia there, southwest, growing full blazing sun. I saw it 100 degrees next to Dazzlerion and Apunchas, basically in New Mexico and in West Texas.
Sure.
So, I mean, Ruscus grows in dense shade in the Mediterranean
No doubt.
in England. This can grow wet or dry on this Eryngium pandanifolium. They're not picky, you know, so, I mean, it goes the full gamut of plants.
Sure.
And some tropical plants and tropical rainforest species have spines. So
some of the palms, like
the palms, like that can grow in partially wet soils too. So yes, it's not just a dry climate thing like this Apuntia, Phaeocantha here.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think we could safely say whatever your growing conditions, there's a group of these that would work for that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Well, that appears to be all of the questions that we have for today. So thank you so much, Greg and Tim, for pulling this presentation together. It was absolutely delightful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the midweek program today. We will be back next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We will be having a garden conversation with John Rothling of Renolda Gardens. So, yes, that'll be Greg leading us through that. And our camera people are dancing for joy right now. So that's a good omen. So we hope y'all will join us next week for the midweek program. We will see y'all then. Y'all take care.
I got an email to send.
Yeah, you do.
We like John. He's okay.